You did everything right. You have memorized the exact difference between an asset and a liability. In pure theory, you know exactly what you must do to build wealth. You have read the right books and studied the right charts. Yet, when a genuine opportunity finally presents itself, you freeze. Why? The brutal truth is that financial intelligence has absolutely nothing to do with mathematics or numbers. It is a violent, ongoing civil war happening entirely inside your own mind. You are not being defeated by the external market. You are being silently gutted by 5 invisible traps: paralyzing fear, endless cynicism, deceptive laziness, obedient habits, and blinding arrogance. Today, we initiate a 7-day war to personally execute the 5 psychological ghosts currently keeping you in a cage. It is exactly 5 o'clock on a Friday afternoon. A sharp notification cuts through the ambient noise of the cafe. The electronic deposit from your employer has successfully cleared your account. This money is the direct conversion of 30 days of your time and labor. You are sitting at a corner table with Julian, your foster father. Julian does not wait for a salary. He owns the commercial plaza where this cafe operates, along with a vast portfolio of real estate and private enterprises across the city. His absolute financial independence and immense wealth are the undeniable proof of his methods, which is exactly why you seek his counsel. Spread across the table between you and the self-made multimillionaire are 3 paper documents. One is the lease invoice for your apartment, another is the installment demand for your automobile, the last is the monthly statement from your credit card provider. Without hesitation, you unlock your device and access your financial application. You are simply executing a routine programmed into you since childhood by your biological father, Mark. Mark was an incredibly hardworking, highly educated man who held a deep moral conviction. An honorable citizen always settles their debts with others before keeping anything for themselves. He believed in absolute financial duty and playing by the rules of society. You follow his philosophy to the letter. You select the account belonging to the property management firm and authorize the rent payment. You select the automotive bank and transfer the car payment. Finally, you select the credit card issuer and clear the minimum balance, adding a slight fraction more to fulfill your sense of duty. The application confirms that all 3 transactions are complete. You exhale heavily. For the next 30 days, you owe nothing to anyone. Then, you navigate back to the primary dashboard to view your remaining capital. The screen displays a balance of 0. You push the device across the wooden table toward your foster father. You let out a short, hollow laugh and state that you do not have a single penny left to invest. You explain that you have honored every obligation and your capital is completely depleted. Julian does not judge your actions, nor does he offer sympathy. He simply taps his fingertips deliberately against the tabletop. His voice is flat and analytical. He points out that you just paid the entire world before paying yourself. You handed your capital to the landlord, the automotive financier, and the credit card corporation. He notes that your strategy is to feed everyone else first, hoping to gather the remaining scraps for yourself at the very end. Julian shifts the focus to the differing consequences of financial choices. He states that your biological father chose the path of the responsible debtor. Mark paid the world first. Because of that specific choice, Mark spent his whole existence on a continuous cycle, laboring endlessly to clear debts that automatically reset every 30 days. It was an honorable life, but the direct consequence was perpetual financial struggle. Then, Julian presents the outcome of his own path. He tells you that if you want to build actual wealth, you must choose a different sequence. You must pay yourself first. The exact second your salary arrives, you must withdraw your investment capital and place it directly into your asset column. He instructs you to purchase an income-producing asset before the landlord or the bank sees a single cent. You immediately push back against this directive. You argue that if you withhold capital from those invoices, the creditors will attack. You list the logical outcomes. The banks will apply heavy late fees. The collection agencies will call your phone relentlessly. Your credit standing will drop. Julian smiles, maintaining a calm and calculated expression. He agrees with your assessment. He confirms that the creditors will scream, and they will threaten you. Then, he tells you that their screaming is exactly the point of the strategy. Julian explains the mechanics of pressure. When you pay yourself first and leave the invoices unpaid, the demands from those creditors create immense psychological terror. That terror, Julian says, is an essential tool. It functions as a heavy weight designed strictly to train your financial muscles. The threat of aggressive collectors forces your brain to wake up. It forces you to hustle, to start a side business, to negotiate smarter deals, and to find entirely new methods to generate the exact amount of money needed to pay those remaining bills. By paying yourself last, you purchase temporary safety. Julian states that this illusion of safety removes the pressure to grow, ensuring you remain intellectually stagnant and guaranteeing your financial situation will never change. Neither philosophy is inherently right or wrong, they simply yield entirely different realities. His logic completely dismantles your current approach. The timeline advances to late Friday night. Your mobile device lights up with messages from your coworkers. They are heading to the bars to spend their newly deposited salaries, and they invite you to join them. You ignore the messages. You power down the device. You sit at your desk and turn on the reading lamp. You pull out a thick stack of commercial investment files and spread the proposals across the wood. You have established a strict deadline of 7 days to execute a deal. You open the first folder, determined to find a way to pay yourself first. The timeline advances to late Saturday night. You are standing in the center of your apartment, staring at the thick stack of commercial investment files spread across your wooden desk. Your body is entirely depleted. You have just survived 60 hours of grueling, relentless corporate labor this week. Your muscles ache, your eyes are heavy, and the dull throb of exhaustion pulses in the back of your head. Directly behind you sits the living room sofa. The television screen is off, but its presence pulls at you like a narcotic. It promises an immediate escape, a mindless sanctuary where you do not have to think, strategize, or fight. Your brain, desperate to conserve energy, begins to deploy its most effective defense mechanism. It starts generating familiar, logical excuses to justify surrender. The internal voice speaks with absolute conviction. You tell yourself that you are simply too tired to process financial data tonight. You look at the complex tax codes and zoning regulations in the first folder and convince yourself that the project is entirely too complicated. You conclude that the risk of failure is too high, and that you lack the necessary expertise to handle a deal of this magnitude. You reach out to close the folders. You prepare to shut off the reading lamp, surrender to the sofa, and sleep until Sunday afternoon. Right as your fingers touch the edge of the cardboard file, the memory of Julian's voice cuts sharply through the heavy fog of your fatigue. You remember a specific lesson your foster father delivered regarding the illusion of hard work. Julian taught you that keeping yourself perpetually busy is the most dangerous, deceptive form of laziness in existence. You use your 60 hours of corporate labor as a brilliant shield. You hide inside your exhausting job to avoid facing the terrifying reality of your financial future. You work yourself to the bone building someone else's empire, so you have a valid excuse to avoid building your own. Julian's philosophy dissects your current paralysis. He explained that whenever you encounter a difficult obstacle and say the words, "I cannot do it," or "I cannot afford it," you are executing a cognitive bypass. Those declarative statements are lies designed to grant your brain permission to stop functioning. The moment you say you cannot do something, your mind shuts down, leaving you with a profound sense of helplessness and resignation. It is the ultimate intellectual surrender. You pull your hand away from the folder, you stand up straight, and physically shake the lethargy from your shoulders. You refuse to let the obedient worker dictate your actions tonight. You execute the mental shift, Julian demanded. You banish the declarative statement and replace it with an interrogative command. You look at the complex financial projections and ask yourself out loud, "How can I do it?" The moment you change the statement into a question, the lock on your brain snaps open. Your mind is forced out of its dormant state. It is suddenly required to burn calories, search for missing variables, and construct viable solutions. To fuel this cognitive engine, you deliberately inject yourself with a concentrated dose of greed. Society always taught you that greed was a moral failing, but Julian taught you that a calculated hunger is the only known cure for laziness. You allow yourself to desire a better existence. You summon a fierce, unapologetic yearning for absolute freedom. You visualize a life where you never again have to wake up exhausted, where you do not have to beg a manager for a few days of vacation, and where your time belongs entirely to you. You use that intense hunger to utterly destroy your physical fatigue. The television remains dark. The sofa remains empty. The logical shift takes complete control of your actions. Thanks to that single change in questioning, your analytical mind kicks into overdrive. You pull up a chair and sit back down at the desk. You open the first folder, then the second, and then the third. You stay awake through the entire night. For the next 7 hours, you meticulously break down every single number, dissect the margins, and search for the hidden angle. By the time the sun begins to rise on Sunday morning, you have successfully mapped out a highly specific, executable investment plan. You have conquered the second barrier. It is Monday morning. You stand on the concrete pavement directly in front of the primary branch of your banking institution. Inside that secure building sits the total sum of your life savings. Every single dollar you have accumulated over the past 10 years of grueling labor is held within those walls. You are preparing to withdraw the entire amount to execute the initial deposit for your commercial investment plan. Your biological response is immediate and aggressive. Your heart pounds heavily against your ribs, echoing in your ears. Your palms are entirely coated in cold sweat. The primal, paralyzing fear of absolute financial loss rises in your throat, choking your resolve. Seeking a familiar tether to safety, you pull out your mobile device and dial the number of your biological father, Mark. You explain your intention to him, hoping for a shred of validation. Over the receiver, Mark's voice completely fractures into outright panic. "You have lost your mind, son," he shouts. "Do you understand what you are doing? Losing that capital means you will be left completely penniless. You cannot gamble with your survival like this. You must divide that capital immediately. Deposit it into 3 or 4 separate, insured savings accounts. You will earn a guaranteed 5% interest annually for absolute safety. Do not take this insane risk." His voice acts as a heavy anchor, attempting to drag you back to the comfortable, heavily guarded prison of the middle class. You pause. You keep the device pressed to your ear, but you stop listening to the frantic warnings. Instead, you recall a specific conversation you had with Julian regarding the exact sensation currently paralyzing your physical body. Julian had completely shattered the greatest myth about wealth. He told you the absolute truth. Every single human being on this planet is terrified of losing their capital. Even the wealthiest investors experience profound fear. The absence of fear does not separate the rich from the poor. The only defining difference lies entirely in how they choose to manage, process, and control that fear. Julian explained that the poor and the middle class are so paralyzed by the potential of losing their money that they design their entire lives around avoiding loss. By constantly playing the coward's game to ensure they never lose a single penny, they systematically guarantee that they will never become rich. They choose a life of perpetual financial stagnation, simply to soothe their daily anxiety. Julian then introduced you to a mindset he defined as the Texas spirit. He used the historical Battle of the Alamo as the ultimate framework for processing extreme risk and inevitable defeat. Julian stated that true winners never attempt to bury their failures. When a winner suffers a devastating loss, they do not hide in shame or retreat into safety. They take that bitter, public defeat, internalize the agony, and transform it into a violent battle cry. Failure acts as a relentless filter. It completely breaks the loser, grinding them down into permanent submission. But for the winner, failure acts as the ultimate inspiration, forging them into something vastly stronger, sharper, and incredibly resilient. Julian taught you that if you are going to risk failure, you must do it boldly, and if you fall, you must use the sheer impact to propel yourself forward. Then, Julian ruthlessly dismantled Mark's exact advice regarding diversification. Mark desperately wants you to divide your capital into multiple safe accounts. Julian called this the ultimate trap for the working class. He outlined the strict law of focus. Julian stated that if you intend to win massive returns, starting with a very small amount of capital, you cannot afford to balance your portfolio. You cannot spread your meager resources across dozens of safe, low-yield accounts. To escape the cycle, you must do the exact opposite. You must practice intense, unwavering focus. You must place a large number of your eggs into one single, highly researched basket, and then you must guard that basket with your life. A safe, spread-out approach ensures you will never lose your initial capital, but it also mathematically guarantees you will remain exactly where you are today. You lower the mobile device from your ear. You terminate the call, completely cutting off your father's panicked pleas for financial safety. You wipe the sweat from your hands onto your trousers. The fear is still present in your chest, but it no longer dictates your physical actions. You step forward, push through the heavy glass doors of the banking institution, and bravely authorize the withdrawal of your entire deposit. The capital is now in your hands, transformed into a physical cashier's check. However, bravery does not equal blind recklessness. To ensure you do not commit any foolish technical errors before signing away your entire net worth, you place the contract securely into your briefcase. You decide to bring the documents directly to your corporate office to conduct one final, meticulous, technical review of the terms. It is Tuesday afternoon. You are standing in the corporate break room, holding a cup of black coffee. You have brought your commercial investment contract to the office to conduct a final technical review. Seeking a professional perspective, you outline your acquisition strategy to Arthur, the senior accountant, and a small group of your colleagues. You expect a logical discussion. You expect constructive feedback from men and women who spend their entire lives looking at corporate ledgers and calculating profit margins. Instead of receiving a professional critique, the entire group bursts into loud, condescending laughter. Arthur scoffs, violently shaking his head in disbelief. He walks over to the communal table, picks up a thick stack of daily financial newspapers, and throws them directly onto your desk. The bold black headlines scream of impending economic disaster, severe recession, and sudden market corrections. You are completely stupid, Arthur tells you, his voice dripping with arrogance and mockery. The market is about to collapse entirely. The newspapers are full of it. Getting involved in a project like this right now is exactly like throwing your money directly into a fire. The other colleagues nod in agreement, laughing at your ambition. The collective noise hits you like a physical weight. The psychological syndrome of the panicked chicken running around the farmyard, screaming that the sky is falling, immediately overwhelms your senses. You look down at the terrifying newspaper headlines. You look at Arthur's smug, dismissive expression. A dense fog of doubt rapidly clouds your judgment. The profound skepticism of the corporate crowd infiltrates your mind, making you aggressively question your own competence. The intense pressure of public ridicule nearly breaks your resolve. You strongly consider canceling the wire transfer and withdrawing your deposit entirely, just to escape their mockery and return to the comfortable safety of the herd. But right before you surrender, you force your mind to recall the brutal lessons you absorbed from Julian. You remember a specific, unapologetic truth about how the masses operate. You remind yourself of the fundamental rule: the weak only know how to criticize, while the winners know how to analyze. The world is heavily populated with cynical people who desperately want you to remain poor because your bold actions force them to confront their own cowardice. The noise of skepticism out there does not protect people, it only makes them poorer. You anchor your mind to the historical example of Colonel Sanders. That man faced the ultimate wall of public skepticism. He traveled across the entire country, pitching his fried chicken recipe to anyone who would listen. He was rejected over 1,000 times by cynical business owners who laughed at his vision. Yet, he remained entirely undeterred by their noise. He ignored the critics, continued to pitch his asset, and achieved massive financial success at the age of 66. He absolutely refused to let the laughter of others dictate his financial reality. You refuse to let Arthur's fear infect your future. Instead of giving in to the collective panic of the break room, you step away from the crowd and sit down at your desk in absolute silence. You stop listening to the terrified chickens and start analyzing the actual data. You open the contract and begin aggressively activating your risk management tools. You refuse to operate on blind faith or raw emotion. You contact the brokers and demand the inclusion of specific capital protection parameters. You insert firm stop-loss clauses into the agreement to mechanically limit any potential downside risk. You review the collateral terms to ensure your initial investment is legally insulated against a market collapse. You use hard financial knowledge to illuminate the actual situation instead of running away from the imaginary shadows cast by a frightened crowd. Arthur and the accountants continue to trade fearful rumors in the break room, perfectly content to remain sidelined observers of wealth. You, however, have successfully neutralized their influence. Having completely eliminated the toxic noise of doubt from your mind, you pack the refined, heavily protected contract into your leather briefcase. You are no longer acting on emotion, you are acting on calculated strategy. You are now fully prepared to confidently bring your capital to the partner's office on the final day to close the deal. It is Friday morning. You are seated inside a highly secure, luxurious corporate negotiation room. Sitting directly opposite you is Chris, an incredibly seasoned commercial broker, flanked by his dedicated legal team. You have successfully navigated the entire week and reached the absolute final stage of your acquisition. The primary contract is laid out on the table between you. However, there is a highly specific addendum concerning ongoing operational costs. Chris leans forward and begins to speak at a rapid, calculated pace. He unleashes a torrential downpour of macroeconomic financial jargon. He references complex matrix charts, yield curve inversions, dynamic leverage ratios, and amortized liability structures to explain what he casually refers to as a standard management fee. He speaks with absolute, unwavering confidence, pointing to formulas and graphical projections that blur together on the paper. In stark reality, you do not comprehend one single concept he is presenting. The terminology is entirely foreign to your current level of financial education. The fee structure is a deliberate labyrinth of shifting percentages and baseline metrics designed specifically to confuse you. This is the exact moment when the fifth and final barrier materializes. Your ego forcefully surfaces, immediately pulling the heavy veil of arrogance over your eyes. In the high-stakes environment of commercial investing, the absolute last thing you want to do is appear completely clueless in front of a sophisticated partner and his sharp legal team. You are desperately trying to maintain the fragile illusion that you belong at this high-level table. You feel the heavy, expectant gazes of the professionals in the room, all waiting for your swift approval. You fall directly into the oldest psychological trap designed by the corporate financial industry. You nod your head in artificial agreement. You offer a slight, knowing smile, pretending to completely understand the dense matrix charts. You do not ask a single clarifying question. Driven entirely by the intense fear of looking uneducated, you reach out and pick up your pen, preparing to sign the binding document blindly. You are literally about to trade a massive portion of your future cash flow simply to protect your foolish pride for a few fleeting minutes. Just before the sharp tip of your pen touches the final signature line, a sudden sound halts your momentum entirely. Julian, who has accompanied you silently as your primary advisor, lightly taps his knuckles against the polished wooden table. The sharp, deliberate noise stops your hand instantly. You look over at your foster father. Julian's gaze is incredibly stern, piercing right through your carefully constructed facade of commercial competence. He does not care about the opinions of the broker or the impatient lawyers. He leans in and delivers the final, brutal lesson of your week. Arrogance is the exact sum of your ego plus your ignorance, Julian states, his voice carrying a cold, uncompromising authority. In this specific game, the things you actually know are the tools that help you generate capital, but the things you do not know, and especially the things you actively try to hide from others, will completely burn through your pockets. You are preparing to sign away your wealth right now just to avoid looking foolish in a room full of strangers. His words hit you like a physical shock. You jump slightly in your leather chair, a sudden layer of cold sweat breaking out across your neck and spine. Julian has completely exposed the pathetic nature of your pride. In a fraction of a second, you realize that protecting your ego is infinitely more expensive than admitting your temporary ignorance. You make a deliberate, forceful choice. You bravely shatter your own arrogant facade into pieces. You place the pen down flat on the table, pushing it firmly away from the contract. You turn your head and look Chris straight in the eye, dropping all pretense and false confidence. "I do not understand one single word of this fee clause," you state, your voice remarkably steady and devoid of any previous embarrassment. "Explain it to me again, from the very beginning, using the absolute simplest language possible." If you cannot explain it so that a child could understand it, or if you try to use those complex charts to confuse me again, I am getting up and walking out that door right now. The atmosphere in the negotiation room shifts instantly. The confident, fast-talking demeanor of the seasoned broker completely evaporates into thin air. Chris becomes visibly flustered. He nervously shifts his weight in his chair and scratches the back of his head. Stripped of his complex vocabulary and intimidating charts, he is forced to speak plainly. Reluctantly, he breaks down the actual mechanics of the dense addendum. As he speaks in simple terms, the truth becomes glaringly obvious. He finally has to admit that the clause is not a standard operational cost, but rather a highly sophisticated profit trap designed to aggressively siphon capital away from your asset and directly into his firm's accounts over the next 10 years. The legal team shifts uncomfortably, realizing their primary tactic has completely failed. By swallowing your pride, demanding absolute clarity, and refusing to let arrogance dictate your actions, you successfully neutralize the ultimate threat. You had single-handedly protected your asset from a devastating financial drain. You push through the heavy revolving doors of the glass skyscraper and step out onto the concrete pavement. The late afternoon sun hangs low in the sky, casting long, sharp shadows across the busy street. The suffocating, artificially cooled air of the corporate negotiation room is instantly replaced by the raw, unfiltered atmosphere of the city. You walk forward, moving purposefully against the chaotic rush of commuters hurrying back to their predictable suburban routines. In your right hand, you firmly grip a sealed leather folder. Inside that folder rests the fully executed contract. It is the very first property ownership agreement of your life that is mathematically guaranteed to generate independent cash flow. It is a physical asset, entirely yours, and it does not require your continuous physical labor to produce income. You stop at the edge of the intersection, waiting for the traffic signals to change. You look down at the leather folder. Acquiring this asset did not require extraordinary genius or highly privileged information. The actual mechanics of the transaction were incredibly simple, yet, the psychological price you paid to secure this document was extraordinarily high. You did not pay for it simply with the capital you withdrew from the banking institution. You paid for it by systematically dismantling the identity you had spent your entire life building. You had to destroy the obedient, compliant employee that your biological father had carefully raised you to be. You had to sever your ultimate reliance on the comfortable paycheck that the corporate system uses to keep its workers permanently tethered to their desks. Breaking free from the endless, exhausting cycle of the rat race is never an external battle. Your voiceover states, cold and resolute, it is never a fight against the volatile market, the shifting interest rates, or the complex numbers on a spreadsheet. It is a ruthless, violent civil war, fought entirely within the boundaries of your own mind. For the past 7 days, I have not defeated a single external enemy. I did not conquer the brokers, the bankers, or the skeptical accountants. I only fought a war of internal attrition. I fought to stifle my own deeply ingrained docility and the dangerous habit of paying everyone else before paying myself. I fought to crush the heavy, paralyzing laziness that perfectly disguised itself as corporate exhaustion and endless excuses. I had to violently overcome the primal, terrifying fear of financial loss that keeps the masses completely paralyzed in safe mediocrity. I had to deliberately deafen my ears to the toxic noise of doubt, continuously broadcasted by a society of cowardly critics. And finally, on the very edge of victory, I had to ruthlessly burn away my own arrogant ego to protect my capital from my own ignorance. Financial victory only comes when you bravely identify and step directly through those 5 ghosts. The traffic signal changes. The crowd surges forward, completely oblivious to the invisible wars being fought around them. You step off the curb, moving toward absolute independence. You have finally stepped outside the glass cage. And you, which ghost holds the key to your life today?